Sounds good. I'm just
I don't
keeping.
know if you guys can see me. If everybody can, please type in the chat very quickly. We didn't connect the microphone. Sorry. I can't switch microphones. Okay. All right, so we're going in with the MacBook microphone. Okay. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. Happy that you can see us both. Can you guys see the presentation really well? Please let us know in the chat as well. Perfect. How's everybody doing tonight? I'll let you guys know I'm currently in New York City. If you guys hear sirens in the background, then you know exactly why now. So just to let everybody know, we're going to be starting in a few minutes. I know that the scheduled event is set to start at 8, but we're going to give people like maybe 1 or 2 minutes to just get settled in. I know it can take a few minutes for people to get in. I know that I run on New York time. I've heard a lot about Indian Standard Time, so I will be very mindful of that. Okay. Right, so we'll get started at 8:02. Is that okay? I think we should be fine. Pretty excited today to have a really solid conversation related to EB-1As and the like. I know that the questions that we're going to be talking about today, or the main question that's on the screen today, is actually one that a lot of us start asking ourselves, and a lot of clients of mine start talking about in consultations. And I'm really excited to address that. Okay, so I know that we have about 1 minute before we get started. My job is to tell you guys a little bit of a disclaimer, right? So whenever I talk to anybody on this presentation or in today's particular webinar, just remember that it doesn't establish an attorney-client relationship between myself and all of you. So if I ever answer any questions, anything of the like during this presentation, it's not really specific legal advice. I will never know the full picture of the story unless you guys do a consultation. But the reality of the matter is I'm trying my best to give you guys as much as I can on these presentations. Separate from that, please remember that the chat is public, guys. So if you guys end up asking questions, making notes, making comments, just remember that everybody else can see it. All right? Aisha, did you click go live on LinkedIn on your end? Just double checking.
It's still grayed out for me.
It's grayed out for her.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Technical difficulties, guys, but not completely abnormal. But I guess, should we get started? All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Aishwarya, I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity because I know that you're equally a host. I'm just talking because I don't like to fill an empty space. Oh, you're also muted on your end.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Hi. Thank you so much for having me here. I am super excited to chat about this because I have done many of these chats one-on-one with people, but I always tell them that, hey, I'm sharing my personal experience, but I'm also like one example out of the pool of multiple different professions. And I personally like worked with a lawyer to help me out with this entire process. So I really don't think I have the full picture of what what an ideal application should look like. So I'm here to like share about my personal story, what are the things that worked for me, what didn't work for me, etc. So yeah, I'm here and I'm great that Nicole, I'm working with you and the Manifest team in order to give a more deeper and a more comprehensive view of how people can start thinking about their EB-1A applications. What are the best practices? What are the do's and don'ts? So I'm glad that I got you on the webinar to chat more about that.
And I really appreciate that. So, just to kind of get things started, let's talk about the agenda of today's presentation or today's webinar, right? Of course, we have some brief introductions between myself and Aishwarya. We're also going to talk a lot about common myths, guys. A lot of the times when we're approaching a category or something like the EB-1A, you feel like there's a lot of information out there, and my job is to help parse out what are the truths, what are the non-truths, and what are some of the things that need to be demystified, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Of course, we're also going to talk about Aishwarya's EB-1A story. It's a wonderful and fantastic story that I think a lot of you need to hear, because I think that it really shows how every single person goes through their own journey when it comes to the EB-1A, and that it is possible to make it to the end of that finish line, which is holding that green card right next to you, knowing that you've made it there, right? Then we're going to go into the question of, am I there yet? Which is the topic of today's, or the main topic of today's webinar, because it's a question that every single one of us here has definitely asked ourselves when we go through this journey. And for a fact, whenever I talk to every single client on a consultation, it's really the first question that they ask me whenever they show me their resume and their credentials. Am I there yet? Is the main question. And then of course, we're going to leave some time for Q&As. So I know that a lot of you might be asking questions in the middle of the conversation. Try to reserve that towards the end. We will do our best to address as many of these questions and answers as possible. Just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Nicole Gunara. I am the principal immigration attorney here at Manifest Law. Manifest Law is a tech-enabled, tech-forward law firm. We are really trying to change the game here, guys. Legal practice is a little bit antiquated. I think a lot of us have met many different lawyers, have worked with many different law firms, and felt like, are there things that we can do better? And I do believe that we can do better. And that is the point of Manifest and why I am here. I have about 7 years in immigration as a whole. I've held leadership positions at prestigious law firms before as well. A lot of my focus are on talent visas or extraordinary ability visas like EB-1As, O-1s. I also have a lot of extensive time and experience in business immigration, and I really also love investment visas like E-1s, E-2s, and L-1 new offices and the like. You can say I've done the whole 9 yards, but a lot of it is because I had to deal with complex immigration matters. But that being said, Aishwarya, if you want to kind of briefly introduce yourself as well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to keep it short.
Mhm.
So currently I'm leading developer relations at Fireworks AI. It's a AI inference startup. And through my career journey, I worked as a data scientist at IBM. Then I moved to Google as a data scientist. Then I spent a year at Microsoft, where I was a senior AI advisor for Y Combinator startup, along with some other Microsoft portfolio startups. So all in all, I've pretty much like spent my entire career in the machine learning AI space. My master's was in data science, so I've been in the space for like quite some time. And maybe if I can like chat a little bit about Nicole, do you want me to like go with the my EB-1A story, or do you want to go with this first? Let's
So
probably like go through the myths first.
yeah, I think we should go through the myths first. And I
Yeah.
think the common myths are really important. And I
Yep.
think your story is going to really break down like how those myths could have possibly prevented you from approaching it. But in going through your journey, you realize, wait, I can break down those barriers that I thought were there, right? How can I build and overcome what I thought was going to prevent me from getting to that point? So let's talk first about common myths on qualifying for the EB-1A, right? The first one that I always hear from so many people, only high profile or famous people can apply. Nicole, I basically need to be a Grammy nominated, Emmy award winning person. I need to be on TV all the time. I need to be the absolute rock star, like everywhere. The answer is no. Right? The answer is no. No one is saying that you need to be somebody with 30 million followers or somebody that's rolling in the deep in cash with millions of dollars in their bank account. Like the reality is that the government set this standard, applied this kind of criteria analysis to allow people from a variety of occupations, far reaching from technology all the way into basket weaving, let's say, be able to achieve what is known as the extraordinary ability visa. What matters is meeting the criteria and being able to show that you are truly one of the top in your specific field. But being one of the top doesn't mean being number one, right? That's the whole point. It's being really in one of the top percentiles. Let's call it the top 10% if I had to make a benchmark, right? And the top 10% is actually a significant number of people. The next one is actually a little bit tied to what I just said earlier. I need a Nobel Prize or an Oscar or a similar award to win, right? To be able to get the EB-1A. I think this is a common misconception because essentially the government allows you to bypass a lot of the analyses if you do have one of these significant international awards. So that's the reason why you might have heard of it. But people conflate it at the end of the day. Again, criteria analysis. Did you meet at least 3 criteria? Yes or no? And did you pass final merits determination? Yes or no? Those are the critical questions, not if you have a singular award, right? So you don't have to be someone who's award winning. The next one also is very interesting, which is the one that I always get asked a lot. Do I need a specific minimum number of citations and or publications? Guys, there's no bright line rule. I don't see anything in the guidances, and Aishwarya, I think you probably know this just as well as I do, right? I don't see a single number. I don't really see anywhere in the guidances and the rules that say you need to have 5, you need to have 10, you need to have 10,000, you need to have 20,000, right? I think we've seen everybody from people who have 0 citations to people who have 10,000 citations win their cases, right? What the government does recognize more in this particular categories or series of categories is really impact, influence, right? That those are the 2 items that really matter more. And also, just to kind of touch upon it, right, a little bit early on, and it's kind of like a teaser, the reality is that they also really understand that some of you are in practical fields, right? Not every single field is like the traditional research field that it's so progressive that you're going to get tons of citations, right? Think of it that way. That's a common myth. Next 2 ones are really straightforward. Only research journals count as scholarly publications. Answer is no, right? There's actually a non-academic route to really qualify for scholarly publications. There is a recognition that not every single one of you are in academia, right? I'm thinking to myself as a lawyer, right? Like, how many times have I ever thought about writing a research paper? It's not really the most common. We might have maybe done it while we were in law school because we have the editorial review, but unless you decided to be a professor or an SJD, why would I be doing research publications? Our field as lawyers is very much a practical field, right? And then the last one for you need an advanced degree, guys, again, not in the rules. There's not really a single rule out there that says you need a master's, you need a bachelor's. Some of the most amazing people in the world have achieved what they have achieved without a degree. Let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg, right? Let's talk about even individuals that are out there that have the best of the programming skills who maybe never even went to college. Like the number of college dropouts that I know who are some of the best and the most talented in software development is actually astounding. That are out there, but don't hold yourself back just because you think to yourself like, oh, this is what I've heard. Guys, it's not about what you hear. It's actually what is the law and how is it being applied. And I would love for Aishwarya to now talk about her journey because those common myths were definitely crushed when you
Yeah.
went through your story and your kind
Yeah.
of path to EB-1A.
Absolutely. I think, Nicole, you laid out a lot of the myths that were stopping me to think about it in the first place. Number one being that, I'm not old enough, or like I'm not a certain number of years into my career. So that really that was like my initial hunch that, hey, like, am I even critical enough for the role, or how do I showcase my significance? Like, do I need to be in a research role because I was in an applied machine learning role? Do I need to be in a research role? Like, is that what qualifies you to be an EB-1A applicant? So all of these came to my mind as well. I'll go back to like the story and like how I got with the EB-1A process. So I came here as an immigrant. I did my master's at Columbia. I did it in data science. And in 2019, I graduated and started working at IBM. In my first couple of attempts with H1B, it did not get picked. So I just had one third attempt left, and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? I love my job. I love being here. Um, I had started like dating my now husband, my boyfriend back then. So I was like, I don't want to like leave all of this. And this is very common, right? Like a lot of people start their family or like they have a life going on here, and it becomes like extremely stressful. So I was just thinking, what is that I could do? And I came across this thing called O1, and this is actually something that my senior manager at IBM recommended because he was also an immigrant. So he actually recommended that it's something that I should check out. And then I started speaking with the IBM lawyers, and we started putting together my petition for the O1 visa. And if you look at the O1 visa, it's very similar to the EB-1A. It has like the same 10 criteria, and you just, like you need to like start putting out content for that. So I started working on that, and to some extent, we were feeling confident that yes, like it's good to do. And I also had that 1 year of time when whatever things were missing, my lawyer was guiding me to say that, hey, like maybe you could get a couple more evidences for this. Maybe you can think about getting a letter from this person. Maybe you can think about getting a letter from that person. So, through that journey, what I realized is that the way that you think of yourself as a professional is very different than how a immigration lawyer thinks of you, or like how they put up a particular petition. Because when I go back, like looking at even my O1 petition, like not just my EB1, even looking at my O1 petition, there was no way that I could have even fathomed that that's how my profile looks like. So it's about like how do you curate the right kind of evidences, how do you put it in the right format. So all of that was something that my lawyers at IBM had started working on. Luckily, in my third attempt, I got my H1B, and then I was like, okay, like now what? Like I've already put so much effort for my O1 application, so I didn't apply for O1, but I was like, okay, now that I have the content ready with me, I had those resources ready with me. What do I do next? So I thought like EB1A is something that I could check out. So again, like the same thing, I started reading about it online, and the more I got into the weeds of it, the more blogs I read, the more experiences I read from people. One, it was, it came to me that, oh, like maybe you need to have like 10, 15 years of work experience. And at that point, I had like what, 2 plus 3 years of work experience. So I was like, oh, maybe I don't qualify. Maybe I'm not good enough for this. And then it was all about like, hey, how is it for research people? Or, like you need to have like hundreds of scholarly articles and like thousands of citations on each of them. You need to be like, one of the renowned researchers in order to like even qualify for it. Those were the same kind of things that I was getting in my head. So what I ended up doing is I set up some consultation calls with a few different lawyers till I found like the right one for me. And I say this in the like the most honest way. Finding the right lawyer is the same way like finding a right partner. You have to have a good chemistry. You have to have that relationship with them, because it's not something that where you work with them for a week or two. Like sometimes it could be months together that you're working with them. So for them to be trusting you, for you to be feeling comfortable sharing your details and like going through that process with them. So I found my lawyer, and I started working with her. We spent another almost a year going from what I had for my O1 to what I built for my EB1A. And just hinting back on one of the myths that you mentioned, Nicole, was that you have to be a super famous personality. This is one of the myths I keep getting. Like whenever I'm on my one-on-one calls with folks and like they're asking me about my experience, they're like, "Oh, for you it might be easier because like you were like you were a LinkedIn influencer." I was like, my entire petition did not have anything to do with LinkedIn. Like I did not mention any of my social media presence, or like none of that was in my petition. It was all about the work that I did at IBM and outside of that, which is purely machine learning focused. So that's another myth that people have, that hey, like if I want to like build a EB1A profile, I need to start being a social media influencer. It's totally not true. So yeah, I mean, after that, I think like I started going deep into not just like trying to get more criteria under my belt, which is like, hey, like how do I increase that count of the number of criterias I satisfy? But at the same time, I still kept at strengthening the criterias which was already satisfying. So if I was, let's say, like I had already done a couple of judging, like if there were more things that were coming my way, I would say yes to them, because the better judging opportunities or like the better kind of platform that I was getting access to. So that sort of helped me strengthen my case even further. And
And
the
can I
other
ask you
thing,
a question
yeah,
on that part that I
yeah.
thought would be helpful for everyone? So when you get an opportunity coming in, right? Like how did you kind of decide whether or not to take on that opportunity, or to kind of pass on it, right? Because maybe not every opportunity is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say like for any of the opportunities that I had been getting, whether it be speaking at an event or like judging a particular hackathon or any sort of like ML award and all of that, like I did it for like the Forbes top AI startups as well. I was a judge on their panel. So for any of these, it was pretty simple for me, which is that, hey, like, is it an invite only? Am I being like invited to be a judge? um who are the other judges in the panel? That also like calls for like, being put in the same bucket. So if they are also like top AI leaders, then I'm being put in the same bucket as one of the judges in that panel. So I was trying to assess for the quality of the brand that was like reaching out to me, like whether it be a college, whether it be a organization who was interested in like partnering with me. So judging it based on the quality of the organization, the reach of that particular event or like that particular hackathon or whatever that is, and what is the impact of that event? Is it something which is specific to like students, or is it something which is bigger than that? Is it about professionals? Whom am I judging? So those were like the things which I sort of like started considering. Again, like all transparency, all of these thoughts started coming to me after I started putting my petition. So I was like reading deep into like the EB-1A criteria and trying to micro assess, like what is that USCIS really cares about. So how do they think that a judging competition is good or not? So I was
Right.
using the same metric to assess for myself that, hey, is this something good for me to like say yes to or not?
So I think this is actually a great way to segue quickly into how did you kind of discover some of these opportunities? Was it that when you were diving really deeply into the guidances, you decided to just
Yeah.
Google, do some research? Like, tell me a little bit more on that.
So I'll be honest about it, is that doing what I was doing since I was a student helped me a lot to shaping my application, because by the time I was even doing my O1 application, I had a lot under my belt without really thinking about it as that, like I need to build a profile. So since I was a student, I was doing a lot of like extracurricular, you may say so, with like talking at conferences, like participating with non-profit organizations. I had done some research projects with that Stanford Health Center. So all of those sort of like things that I would have done anyways, which I didn't really specifically think about from an immigration perspective, helped me to at least like get a good framework to work with. And eventually, because I had spoken in say like 30, 40 talks, that gave me a lot more inbound requests. So because I had spoken at PyTorch conference, because I had spoken at Open Data Science conference, those brought me more opportunities. And let's say there was something that I wanted to like target, and I felt that, hey, this is a good conference I should be talking at. That outbound reach out was also a positive conversion because of the history that I had put together in my profile. So all in all, I would say like whenever people talk about like, how do you organically start doing it, is that think about your career irrespective of this immigration thing. If you are focused on doing great at what you're doing, and if you try to like contribute with good projects, if you're able to contribute to the community in like AI community, for in my case, but whatever like profession you have, if you irrespectively think about doing really good projects or impactful work in your profession, that'll eventually contribute to your immigration petition. So
It's very organic, right? In a way,
yeah.
it's like you are establishing your own credibility within your career, within kind of your pathway in life as well, But in doing that, it naturally created like the necessary tools that you needed in order to really achieve that EB-1A in a way, or to
Yeah.
build that crafting towards the EB-1A. So now I'm curious to hear. So now that you recognize like, okay, I was establishing more items as kind of we were building the application, right? What made you decide to pull the trigger? Like, tell me the next stage of your story. Like, what happened with the lawyer and etc.
So I'll tell you, like, my lawyer was playing devil's advocate, and I'm glad she did that, because every time I would like do something and, like, get another recommendation letter, and from somebody who's like super senior, like one of the leaders in the AI space, she would still keep pushing back on me. She'll be like, no, it's not good enough. You can still do better. You can still do better. And somewhere I feel that doing that activity with her really helped me strengthen my case, because again, like, I feel like when you know your field very well, like, you sometimes miss out the details on how you should communicate about it to somebody who doesn't know it at all, like. And in that case, like, I'm thinking about it as a USCIS reviewer, right? They don't know anything about AI. So how should you communicate what you're doing in the right manner to that USCIS reviewer so it gets recognized? I think is a very, very important thing. And that's why it's very important that you work with a reputed lawyer, like you work with somebody who really understands the legal aspect of it, so that they can showcase your case in a very credible manner. So for me, I probably, like, maybe 3 or 4 months before I actually filed my petition, I was like, I think I'm good. Like, I'm tired of doing this. But my lawyer was like, no, we'll do more. Like, we'll do more. Like, we'll get you like more letters. We'll get you more opportunities. You have to like do more and, like, really fill up this application. So yeah, that's when, like, probably like whenever she decided that it's time to pull the trigger is when she pulled the trigger. But I was not an active participant of telling her like, now we're ready to go, because I kept telling that, but she made me work really, really hard for it.
No, and the funny thing is when you said devil's advocate, I kind of laughed a little bit, right? It's because I feel like the running joke, at least in my office, is that it's not that I bully the client, is that I feel like I get mad at them a little bit, but it's really because it comes from a place of passion, right? It's like, no, 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 you need to understand, like you might need to push yourself to the limits. You need to be a little bit uncomfortable because discomfort shows a level of growth. Right? Like something is changing and it's going to be changing for the better, right? So I love that you are a very receptive client in a way, right? Because usually when I have these conversations with a lot of people, they're like, Nicole, but like, I just want to file now. And I'm like,
Yeah,
well, just a little bit more can really go a long way. You're
yeah,
about to invest so much money into these
yeah,
filing fees, right?
yeah.
Just trust me, you push that little extra inch, it really, really will help your
Yeah,
application, right? But
absolutely.
any other like thoughts that you want to share when it comes to your story, right? I would love to kind of be able to make sure that everyone hears all these wonderful aspects.
So again, it's something that I'm speculating. Like, there's no proven mantra for this, but one of the things which, again, like, what I discussed with my lawyer, and like things that she said is good for my case, is sustained impact. Which is, it's not the case that everything that I did, like, or the media or the publications or the critical role, everything was not bucketed in like a 6 months or like a 1 year time frame. It was spread over for like a good 3 years, or even before, like since I was a student. So there was a lot of things that built up to what I was trying to present at that point. And that is something I feel like is very important, that people start thinking about EB-1A case as a sustained impact. So it don't rush into it. Like, don't rush into like filing, as you said, right? Like, I don't think rushing into filing it would make sense, because you don't want a rejection in your under your belt. Not that it really like hampers, you could always like reapply, but you don't ideally want to do that, at least in the first attempt. So if it happens where you have to like spend, say, like a couple of years in building your profile, spacing it out, building things organically, because there's one thing where you're doing like outbound and you're trying to look up for opportunities. In the process, you end up getting a lot inbound, and that really makes a difference. So it's not just that you're trying to reach out, but organically over time you end up getting a lot more opportunities which strengthen your case even further. So I think like spacing it out, being more mindful about like how you showcase that sustained impact, and it's not something which is just, like just because I had to file it, so like all my publications are in the last 6 months, that I believe plays against you, especially like there's like a completeness check, if I'm like saying it right. Yeah. So like apart from like satisfying the criterias, there's like a totality of the case that USCIS looks at.
Yeah,
So
it's known
even
as
though
that final merits determination, just to so
exactly,
everyone.
yeah. So even though like you might feel that you're satisfying the criteria like as a checkbox, but if the USCIS reviewer feels that, hey, like, sure, you're satisfying that, but like as a totality of the case, it doesn't feel strong enough, then they might reject it. So, yeah, like that's why I feel like it's important that you organically build a lot of these things and space it out, make it feel like that's what will make your profile really strong.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Ashwarya, for sharing your story. I think it's so wonderful to hear when people go through these journeys and they come out at the end with that achievement that we're all kind of looking for,
Yeah.
right? And I really think it illustrated very well like how not only common myths can help prevent you from really trying something, but also how like sometimes randomly you like find your way, right?
Yeah.
America doesn't do a great job in explaining like all of his immigration systems, what is possible out there. I think all of us have definitely been on multiple different websites trying to look for information, and there's just like a lot that's out there, and we don't know what's right and what's wrong. But thank you for sharing it.
So much. And yeah, I would love to like answer if you have any other questions or if there's like any questions from the chat. I'm happy to answer them.
So I see like a common question that a lot of people are asking has to do with the criteria. Did you get an approval out of 10? I think it's actually a very hard question to answer, but maybe the better question is which criteria did you feel were like the strongest for you, or which ones did you focus on the most?
So, okay, like the way that I perceived it, or like the way that I worked through my criterias is obviously like going through the low-hanging fruits. Like we were discussing about this earlier on, right? So things which feel more objective, which seem more like a checkbox. Say, for example, like having like the salary criteria, or like being present in the media, like being featured in the media. A lot of these criterias are more objective, which is like, hey, it's a yes or no, compared to criterias like critical role or like significant impact are more harder to like document. So I obviously like started from that there, like whatever I needed to do for like those low hanging fruit criterias, that's where I started with. For the more subjective ones, what I ended up doing is I tried to connect the dots in multiple different ways. Like I'll give you an example. So one of the projects that I was leading at IBM was with United Nations, and it was something that our VP was directly overlooking. So I was leading that project, and it drove several like double X $1 million of revenue for IBM just with that project. So that one project was something that I used as critical role. That is something that I used as a significant impact, and that also was published as part of a media. So it sort of sat in all the three criterias. I talked about it in all those three criterias, and I tried to like get as many letters as possible that I could get from like really impactful folks who were involved in that particular project. That sort of connected the dots of the story that I'm trying to communicate. So like the IBM's VP wrote about something that I did in the project, like which was more focusing on like how did it help IBM. The person who was like the VP at United Nations, they wrote about something that how did the project that I built for them helped UN. So it was like their side of the story. So basically, I was trying to stitch all the connected tissues of that entire like that entire project in a very strong manner, so that it's like communicated really well in my petition. So that's one example. Then I had actually like my patent, which was published while I was at IBM. It is something that I actually published when I was an intern at IBM. So it got approved in 2020, but then the patent that we had, even while it was like pending, we built a product around it, and that product was a solution that was being implemented in multiple different customers customer environments. So that also had like multi-million dollar value attached to it. So again, it was not just about like significant sorry unique contribution. I think that's what it is, right? Like
Original contributions,
original
yeah.
contribution. So it was part of like original contribution in the patent. How did it impact IBM? So what was my significant role, because I was the lead on that patent as well. And then like how did it drive revenue for IBM, and what is the impact that it has outside of just being a patent? So again, like for each of the criteria, I felt I did like a very thorough research, or like for myself, which I also did not know a lot about. I was like, okay, I did this, but that's it, right? Like, you don't try to like dive so deep into it. But because it was for the petition, I dove really deep into it. Over time, I think also, I mean, this is a nit, but over time, I thought like having good relationship with all the folks that I worked with was also very helpful, because when I was applying, like these some of these projects were like a year or more than a year old. So
Right.
all that through all that time, I had stayed in touch with the leadership that I'd been working with. So they were kind enough to like, within a week, they came back to me with the letter signed and everything ready to go. So it's a small nit, but then I feel like that also makes a very big difference. So like whenever you're thinking about your career, like make sure that you're actively putting effort to maintaining those relationships with people, with the leadership that you're working with.
All right. So I know that we have a lot of questions, and I think we can save some of them towards the Q&A. So Ashwarya, we can kind of go trade back and forth on the
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
But let's kind of continue the presentation, because I would really love to share kind of what it looks like for a lawyer's perspective, right? Of how we kind of pull up the best of the achievements for any individual, and how, this question, right, that we talked about from the very beginning of like, am I there yet? Right? We hold ourselves back a lot. I think we all come from a community, Asians generally, we're very modest individuals, right? We always feel for some reason that every time we do something, even if you collect all the evidence together, that somehow that it may not be enough. We're always comparing ourselves to somebody else, right? So for example, if I'm working for Google DeepMind, all of a sudden I feel like, is that good enough because there's some guy working for OpenAI that's earning like $1 million a year? The number of times that I encounter people who are kind of really in that rabbit hole of, am I good enough, right? It's immense. So this is what I mean. And look at this image right here that I have on the screen, right? When a client comes to me with the question of, am I there yet? A lot of the same questions that come to mind is that, oh, I just feel like I have low chances of approval. It's not possible, but it's not eligible. But I want to tell you guys the wonderful story of a client of ours, and obviously anonymized name. His name is Henry, right? Where he's actually really just a normal guy, right? And what I mean by a normal guy is that he's working his day-to-day life, right? He has an EB-2 perm already approved. However, he has a foreign born child, an Indian born child, that he has to be very considerate of, because he's worried that this child is going to age out before he's able to adjust and become a green card holder. So Henry approaches me, right, as an attorney, and basically says, listen, this is my profile, right, Nicole? I don't know if I'm ever going to be there yet. I am a senior database administrator, right? Pretty normal job title, if you had to ask me, right? Very straightforward. I work for a mid-size firm here in New York. It's not a brand name. I personally have never heard of it, right? I looked at his resume, and let's start with this. Superficially, I had questions. But this is where a really good advocate can come in and say, all right, what do I need to find out from your profile? What do I need to find out from you as a person, right? To see what can be done to not only mold and shape and figure out what makes you as a person extraordinary, right? But what is a way to sell a compelling narrative to the government, right? what I'm trying to emphasize in today's presentation and in this portion of my conversation today with all of you there is every single one of you is not only capable of doing something extraordinary, sometimes you don't know that you're already extraordinary. And that's the reason why you have that question of, am I there yet? Right? And that's what I'm here to try to answer for you and how I figured it out and what made me change my mind about that superficial resume that I got from Henry, right? So I want to focus on some of the criteria specifically from Henry's profile that made me change my mind. And that first criteria was scholarly articles and publications, right? I know like the first thing that all of us here are going to say is, okay, Nicole, I know in the beginning you broke the myth, but at the end of the day, isn't scholarly articles and publications just research journals? Nicole, I'm working as a senior database administrator just like Henry. How am I supposed to be doing original research? I don't have a laboratory. The reality is that, okay, Henry did have some research papers, but he also had a lot of thought leadership, guys. So what does thought leadership even look like? He published a lot of great blogs, a lot of great articles that were published in industry publications, right? Everybody forgets that the government actually adjudicates this particular category between two different ways. There's the academic way and there's the non-academic way. And the non-academic way is critical because for many of you who are on today's call or today's like webinar, you're in a field that's very practical. You don't really have that opportunity to do the research, right? So when I saw this on Henry's resume and I was thinking to myself, all right, tell me more about these publications. He managed to get himself published into places where people were industry experts who would review these publications. So let's give some examples, right? If you are someone who's in financial technology, right? If you're published on a publication like payments.com, which is a very popular website that other people in fintech read, that can count. So what made me change my mind about Henry's profile, weirdly enough, was actually the fact that he had this thought leadership. And the second portion of it too is when I looked at, he did have scholarly articles. I want to let you guys know he did have some publications during the time of his education, but there weren't that many citations. Like I know all of you are thinking, oh my God, I might need 100 citations if I only have scholarly publications. I don't have this thought leadership. But the reality is that senior database administrators, people who are working in this field, you're not in a field that's known for progressive research with a ton of other people who are citing to your work. If somebody sees your work, they're probably going to incorporate it in a practical way. So how did I prove in this case, or how did I kind of change my mind about how we were going to do this criteria and said, you know what, Henry, you're going to be able to do it? Actually, Henry managed to get his articles put into suggested reading for professors in other universities. So hear me out, guys, right? You can go to your old professors. Remember those syllabi, those massive syllabi that you would get at the start of your course, right? In the beginning, you have like the reading that you had to buy, right? You go to the textbook store, you buy all the textbooks that you need. And then you have the second page where it's like suggested reading. Like, look at all this stuff that maybe will be helpful for your education, right? Guys, reach out to your professors. Just like Aishwarya said, where she cultivated her network when she was during your academic pursuits, right? That network is so powerful, right? Because when you reach out to your former professors, honestly, or even like your graduate research assistant friends who are like adjuncts, it's actually wonderful that you can actually just ask them like, hey, do you mind like putting my article, putting my work onto the suggested reading list? It's very quick for them. It's not really like anything that requires anyone to buy the book or buy access. It's actually something that I can show to the government as like, hey, look, it's being used in an academic setting. It's going to teach the next generation of senior database administrators, the next generation of STEM professionals to be able to do these things, right? So that being said, right, this particular criteria, when I first look at Henry's profile and it said not that many citations, maybe a few blogs, once I found out like where he was being published and how I could show the critical word here, which is the impact, the practical impact and influence and that narrative, I changed my mind, right? And that kind of really goes towards the question of, am I there yet? So then the next criteria that we really talked about was judging, right? Judging the work of others. So many of you know that peer review is something that's very common in this field, right? Or alternatively, judging hackathons, competitions, and the like. But the reality is that there's a lot of competitions and there's a lot of people who judge these papers and the like. So, how did I change my mind for Henry if I felt that his profile was very generic in this particular field? When he presented his profile to me, there was only maybe 4 or 5 different competitions that he was involved with. So, he didn't actually do that many peer review opportunities. It was mainly in competition settings. Well, you know what made me change my mind is that he kept in touch with all the people that he reviewed and all the people that he judged. So, what does that even mean? I remember in the conversation that I found out that some of the things that he judged, so he judged like a hackathon and he also judged a pitch competition. And the pitch competition was actually the most interesting to me. And the reason why it was interesting was because one of those companies became a successful company. They ended up hiring multiple US citizens and green card holders. And you know why that's powerful? Impact. Because the letter that we got from that person who got Henry's feedback during that competition was willing to say, like, Henry's feedback was really impactful to me. I was able to grow my company to change the direction of what I decided to do for the benefit of growing it to the point where I was able to contribute to the US economy, right? And it wasn't just for that pitch competition, even for certain activities that Henry did, or even other people who aren't like Henry. Let's say you did peer review, right? If you manage to keep copies of those comments, right? Or you manage to actually see like what happened to that publication after you did the peer review, you can make that argument. So what turned the tables for me? What made me say, Henry, I think you are there for the criteria? Going to circle it back again, impact, right? I was able to show that tangible impact related to judging, right? Even if it felt very small in the beginning, 5 opportunities that they did, is that really enough? Yes, it was enough because I was able to show these are the common thread lines that really showed that influence that he had despite those limited opportunities. Next criteria that I was going to talk about is original contributions of major significance. So sometimes when a lawyer takes a look at this particular criteria, we kind of sigh a little bit. And Ashwarya, I think you talked a lot about original contributions. It's just one of those weird categories that's just very subjective compared to the others, right? Because what does it mean to be original and what does it mean to be of major significance? So when I looked at Henry's particular profile, he was working for, again, a mid-sized firm, right? There wasn't really anything that screamed at me from his portfolio that's like, oh, could this be something of major significance? But I decided to really unpack, like, what it is that he did. I asked him, name like the top 3 projects that you ever worked on for this company, because he had been there for about like 4 or 5 years, right? So he named all of them, but one of them stuck out to me, right? And one of them that stuck out to me is that, hey, I managed to create like this really cool new way to make it much more efficient to do 401k transactions. And we were able to outsource that to some really large financial institutions. And I was like, hey, wait a second. Like, that sounds really, really cool, right? Tell me more about that story, right? Because the moment that I heard like outsource or manage to like get it into the hands of others, I was like, well, how many others, right? Is it like, 10 people or is it like 100,000 people? Tell me more. So in explaining that story, we managed to find out like, hey, no, it's actually like in a pilot program with 2 million customers at the moment, right? And when I think about that storyline of 401ks, guys, you guys may or may not know what a 401k is. It's a retirement fund, right? So when those consumers are using his tool, it's helping contribute to their ability to retire comfortably here in the United States. So when you take a look at this slide right here, right, I always think of original contributions kind of like, I wouldn't even say a function, but this kind of process, right? Was there a problem that existed? So I asked Henry, tell me what the problem was. The problem is 401k transactions were too slow. For a lot of institutions, it's very mechanical. Like it was just very hard to like balance all these things, right? So what is the innovation? Well, we could figure out this new mechanism. Like at the end of the day, I'm not a subject matter expert, but this guy seemed to have figured out something that was really cool and something that was really fast. So that's the innovation. Then the real world impact. So what was the real world impact, Henry? Well, the impact is that now I have about 1 million or so customers using it. So the next question that naturally came is, well, prove it, right? Like, how would you prove this to me? So I think a lot of you already know that letters of recommendation can really help. Letters of recommendation are something that can show some level of affirmation. But I think some of you have already pointed it out in the chat. Is that enough, right? Is that enough? The answer is no. But it takes a really good lawyer and also a really good collaborator in Henry to figure out, so how do I bridge that gap? How do I find other pieces of information? Well, I tried to look at any publications that talked about any changes in the 401k universe, right? Like, were there anything that talked about one of the companies recently that did utilize this work, which it wasn't public, right? But that talked about like, hey, we made these improvements. You'd be surprised at how many times that these little comments end up in SEC reports, end up in like really tiny like news and niche publications. And we managed to find two publications that talked about these improvements, like very small quotes, even though none of them mentioned Henry, even if none of them mentioned the company that Henry worked for, even, and the fact that they outsourced it. The letters of recommendation ended up serving as a bridge, guys. And that's what I want you guys to think of the letters of recommendation. Here's the articles. Here's the letters of recommendation that say, Henry did this, we did this, and we outsourced it to the largest financial institutions in the world. Here's the articles. Then all of a sudden, it becomes much more believable, right? Nobody says that you guys have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not the same standard as like criminal law, where like for sure you definitely had to have killed that guy, right, in order to be committed to jail. In the land of USCIS, it's the preponderance of evidence. 51% of the time, when they look at the magical crystal ball that is you, right, is it more likely than not that you did it, right? So that bridge, at least for this application, when we put it together, was enough, right? The letters of recommendation, the slight two things that we found in articles. And guys, it's not just articles. You can have screenshots. You can have so many things, right, that can serve as that lynching point, like that lynch point or the lynch pin, sorry, here at the end, that really can push towards this original concepts of major significance. But when I go back to that question of, am I there yet? Again, when I saw that resume, and when even Henry presented himself to me, he was like, oh, I don't think that I'm there yet. I'm not sure, right? It's these kinds of stories and things that you don't think about to yourself immediately that actually come about very nicely to meet some of these criteria. And that turned the table for me, right? Think about this, I want to say equation, but this process. Did you have a problem? Did you have an innovation? And did you have a real work impact? And are there ways that you can prove it so that 51% of the time when the officer looks at it, they feel that it is true and that it happened, right? So really, let's go back to kind of the bigger picture, right? The totality of who you are, right? The extraordinary talent. I really want to let every single one of you know who is going through this journey. There is a path, right? Aishwarya shared her own personal story. It's not like she started that journey and was like, I am immediately qualified for the EB-1A, right? It took time. It took time to get to that endpoint of like being comfortable enough to file that application, and it took time to build towards it. But every single one of us has that ability to become extraordinary and really achieve that level of greatness. And like the one thing that I really want to touch upon when it comes to this totality of who you are is that it contributes directly to the concept of the final merits determination, right? Because the criteria is not everything. So we talked earlier about 3 criteria that we focused on, right? But the criteria analysis is only one of 2 parts of any EB-1A application. And that second part is the final merits. It's making the officer truly feel that you're at the very top of your field, right? What is that benefit? What is that impact that you're going to have in the United States if we are to accelerate your green card process, right? So what is it? Is it that you need to have the best career? You need to have the best title? Is it about where you work and the like, right? I think it's not really that. It's actually, how do you express to the government, or how do you express to the government like how you are different from everyone else, right? So when you're striving for that greatness, I want you guys to think about what Aishwarya said earlier. Outside of maybe my 9 to 5 or my occupation, right? Or outside of thinking in the boxes that USCIS has created for the criteria, what are things that you can show to establish your credibility and improve your credibility within your field, right? Is it that you're going to be joining open source projects? Guys, open source projects are lovely. You're contributing to free innovation. right? You are externalizing like a lot of the coolest things that you know that's inside your head, your insights, and sharing them with the world. Maybe it's that you're going to figure out ways to fight wildfires or figure out where wildfires are faster. I know all you data scientists, trust me, the government's looking for your free work, right? It exists. You can volunteer for those. There are a lot of charitable organizations that also want your help, right? I know a lot of people in the nonprofit sector, and they always tell me, Nicole, there's money out there. There's a lot of money out there. We can get the donations, but you know what we can't get? Help, right? So think about like some of the problems that are out there that you can help solve, right? And if you can help solve that and you can get these nonprofits to say, look at all of these amazing things that, let's say someone like Aishwarya helped me with, right? It adds to a powerful flavor to that story, right? So when I go back to that question of, am I there yet? Right? And the one question that every single consultation ends up leading to, right? Don't be surprised that you actually may be. Because with Henry's story, it might feel like it's so far away, but I am telling you, when that profile was first presented to me, senior database administrator, mid-sized firm, right? Maybe only 5 years of domestic experience here in the United States, zero citations or very low number of citations, right? It doesn't feel like you're there yet, but then with the right questions and the right kind of like critical thinking of going through everything that you've ever done, right? We were able to really figure out that he is there yet. So don't sell yourself short. And I'm really hoping that today's presentation was able to show you how those things can be unearthed. All of you guys can think very deeply about all the coolest projects that you've been a part of, right? Um, a lot of you are in the field of STEM, and I'm actually kind of jealous of all of you. I wish that I could know like 50% of what you guys know. Like I tried to teach myself Python like 2 weekends ago, and it was a disaster, right? And the reality is that it's not really for me, but I want to learn those things. But the reality is that you guys do so many cool things, right? Every single one of you does. And it's important to share those cool things with with the attorney. Don't be modest with yourself. Whenever you talk to someone, especially a professional in this field of immigration, it's time to peacock your feathers, guys. Tell me everything, right? Tell me everything about you. And then we can work together to decide, are you there yet? And even if you're not, how do you become there? It's part of that conversation, right? So thank you everyone for that presentation. It's kind of Q&A time. I just want to let everybody know here very quickly that this is a publicly recorded webinar. We will be sharing this for everyone here because I know that there were some comments and some messages here from the chat that basically said like, hey, like I don't know if I can hear everything, so we'll make sure to get that sent out. But today's conversation, I hope was very helpful for everyone. And I think we have a few minutes now to kind of answer a few questions. But yeah, so why don't we start with some really wonderful questions that I saw coming in, right? So give me 1 second. One of the biggest questions that I saw here earlier that I thought was remarkable, and I think Aishwarya, you can speak to it because you worked at a big organization, right? Is if we can't get work samples in the organization due to work restrictions, right? Or there's kind of limitations because fellow employees may be uncomfortable. How do we improve that proof of like leading role, right? I have a few comments on this, but I'm curious to hear like some of the encountrances that you had.
So, I had that pushback for once, where the VP wasn't sure if he can really mention the numbers on the letter. But once I connected with the internal lawyer at the team, and they clarified that because it's being issued to USCIS, it is okay for them to like mention those details even though they are confidential. So I think that the same thing followed through like all of my other, whenever I was getting letters and I wanted them to like really talk about those numbers and like talk about those impact. um I made a case with them that, hey, like, here is what my lawyer says. And, like, because this is going to like US government, that's why it's like okay for you to like mention like classified information or like confidential information as well. So most of them did not have a problem. Maybe in a couple of cases where it was external organizations, they didn't want to mention like because it's coming from like a non-IBM entity. What they did was, instead of like mentioning the actual numbers, instead of saying like say like 56 million, they just said x million. So Those were like some rounding off or like some level of anonymization that they did on the letter. But to most part, like I did not have trouble in convincing them that this is going to USCIS, so like you don't have any issues like with adding classified information. But I would love to like hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, if anything, I'm going to tell you guys how to think a little bit outside the box, right? So let's say you are an IT consultant, right? Sometimes you're in the hardest position because as a consultant, whether you have NDA agreements or there's like a lot of things that you can't really necessarily share, you feel very restricted. And maybe there's too much bureaucracy or you feel so distant that maybe you don't have access to the internal in-house counsel, right? That would be able to help you the same way that maybe helped Ashwarya during her journey, right? So when I think to myself, like, how do I prove my lead critical role in this capacity? Two things. Number one is if you have a great relationship with your client and you feel like it's okay to reach out to your end client, maybe they would be willing to help prove that you actually did something amazing through your company, right? So if I work for like a Tata Consulting Services and my end client, I'm sorry, there's a lot of sirens in the background, it's New York City, right? But the reality is that if one of my clients really likes me and I can approach them on a personal level, right? Hey, do you mind just kind of saying like how I was really helpful to you in providing you my services and the like? And it's okay for you to do that, then great. That's always going to be a wonderful recommendation letter that can replace maybe the generic manager letter, the person who directly oversees you. And in many ways can be much more powerful. It's a little bit more impressive when your client, let's say you're working again for a consulting firm and your end client is Walmart, you get a letter from Walmart instead of the the mini consulting firm that you work at. That's a really powerful letter all of a sudden, right? The second thing that I also recommend is that, again, remember what I said about bridging gaps. The letters can be combined with some of these articles that talk about some of the amazing things that you may have worked on, but it may not cite to you, it might not reference you. But the letters can bridge into those articles, guys, right? So if you were responsible for improving the Amazon Fire TV, like the remotes like sucked at one point, and then next year it got a better review, I would probably show that even if your name is not mentioned. If I had a letter of recommendation or something simple that said like, hey, you were the one to help design that new remote or that new Fire TV, suddenly the picture seems a little bit fuller, right? um I know that we don't have that much time. We only have about a minute left. I'm sorry, I wish I had more time for Q&A, but I think we had a lot to talk about, right? But I think what I want to kind of touch upon very quickly, because I saw that this was a consistent question, was how long was the profile building? How long was the journey, right? So Ashwarya, I know that yours was a number of years, but you tell me, how did you feel in terms of the process and how long was it?
So for me, again, like I'm discounting on the number of years which I had spent on, like, say, organic stuff. So here is the biggest tip that I would give you. Like, yes, doing what I was doing in my career organically helped me to some extent in what I was doing for my petition, but it still took me about a year to go from like my O1 application, which I put. Maybe that was also like that also took a year or so. So maybe like combined close to 2 years. Um, but for anybody who's starting new, again, like I would say that instead of wasting time on trying to figure out this journey by yourself, work with a lawyer, because anything that you're planning on doing in your career organically is great. But then when you just get started with this journey, even if you're, say, like at a 20% mark of like where your petition should look like, or like if you're just like 20% through that journey, if you start working with a lawyer, they give you a right direction. So what took me 2 years working with a lawyer could have taken me like much longer if I had ended up doing it by myself, or like, trying to figure out that own trajectory by myself. So even though you feel in your mind that you're not ready yet, like start working with the lawyer, start chatting with the lawyer. They'll be able to guide you in a much better manner on, hey, like start going behind these criteria. These are low hanging fruits. And then let's meet after 2 months, or like let's meet after 3 months. That process is going to be much more focused and much more faster than trying to do it by yourself. So that's my biggest recommendations, that like start with a lawyer. If you eventually have it in your mind that hey, you want to go through this process, the earlier the better. Get a consultation, start chatting with them, try to tell your story with them. They'll be able to, like, create a framework for you that, hey, like these are the first two, three things you get started with, then we can go with these other criteria. So they sort of like shape it in a much better and much cleaner manner that individuals we might not be able to do it ourselves. So that's my recommendation. It time varies. Like if you are somebody who has like hypothetically, let's say like 15 years of experience and it's been like hyper focused, you've already like knocked a lot of the criteria organically in your in your career, then it might take 6 months for you. It might take less than that. But if you're somebody who's starting off, who doesn't have a lot of things on their plate right now, it might take a couple of years or more. So it's a very subjective question for me to answer. Nicole, if you have a better insight into that.
I think like just like as a quick tip and like kind of quick wrapping up, I do agree that it kind of depends on what you're coming in with, right? Obviously, it does help when you have a lot of years of experience, but I think what I really try to gauge when I try to give somebody a timeline is what is your credibility level at? And I know that's like a strange question to ask, right? But if I look at your profile and I look at your resume, right, and I see that you've done like some really cool work. I know I keep on saying cool. I like cool because it's like if you're distinguishable or there's something like really fun about the things that you've done, it makes it easier for me to do my job, right? Because I think it's easier to sell to the government why you're unique and why you're distinguishable, right? But obviously, the more that you have under your belt coming to me, the faster the process can become. But at the end of the day, there's no specific number. I find that building over a period of time, like closer to like a year, is always really good. I know many of you are saying, but what about 6 months? What about 6 months? What about 6 months? For those of you who are targeting more for 6 months, you really need to already be coming to me with at least two really solid criteria. That's what I tell people, right? At least, at minimum, right? And what I mean by two solid criteria is that don't show up to me with your first job at Amazon and you have high remuneration as well, right? Technically, you have two criteria met, but credibility again, but you're still new to the game, right? You haven't really done much, right? You can maybe argue that you have a critical role for a big company and that you have a lot of payment, but how can you leverage that to do more, right? So suddenly 6 months is not as feasible, but that's what I mean by two solid criteria. You have something really going for you for the other two, then all of a sudden 6 months may not be too bad to be able to acquire that third, that fourth, that fifth that we're really looking for. But I know that we're at time, right? I know we've gone a little bit over. I know that many of you have questions, but here's what I will say, right? We have right here the email address to reach out to us here at Manifest Law. We're more than happy to try to address as many of your questions as possible. We are providing free consultations for individuals who are eligible. Please don't hesitate to reach out through the website here that is listed and linked in the chat. If you decide to email us instead, you can mention Aishwarya for a discount. We are providing also courtesy pricing for individuals who are coming our way through this webinar. I really hope that every single person here did learn a lot when it comes to like how we approach EB-1As, how these stories kind of came about, and that the fact of the matter is that it is very much possible. But thank you, Aishwarya, for joining us on our conversation today, right? I really hope that today's webinar was really good for you as well. It was amazing for me.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Right? Please don't hesitate to reach out. I really do hope it's insightful. I really try to push as much knowledge out there, okay? Take care. Bye.